Alec Kerr, the film critic for the Conway Daily Sun, and I'm joined by
Rob Clark, film buff, I guess you'd say. That's why we're here.
and we're going to talk about each of our 10 favorite films, not best films of the year. We're talking about our favorite films of the year. And so we got a lot to get through, so let's just jump right in. But your number 10 is actually not a number 10.
No, I started off a little funky because I have five movies in my number 10 that are actually not my favorite movies, but they are probably on many, many people's favorite movie lists. So we've got a graphic here, I think, for it. And people might be surprised. They're like, well, what's in your top 9 then if these 4 are in that? The Holdovers, Paul Giamatti was great. The person who played the young kid, great. I think overall it just was a flat movie.
Okay.
The Killers of the Flower Moon, loved the second half of the movie. Basically, as soon as Jesse Plemons showed up, fabulous movie. Overall, just long and drawn out. Robert De Niro was great in that one. American Fiction should have been phenomenal. The preview looked hysterical. If they had focused, it's basically kind of 3 movies, I think, 3 different stories.
I've heard that, yeah, because I haven't watched it yet.
If you focused on one of the stories, it would have been top notch. It got bogged down by other stuff.
Yeah.
And then Oppenheimer, great movie, enjoyed it when I watched it. It's just so big and grandiose, and what's going on, how do you follow those things? And then the 5th one that is also should have been there is Poor Things.
Yeah.
I couldn't get through it. I'm going to try it again. I just couldn't get through it.
Yeah, and I actually had some of those movies floating kind of just below my 10.
Interesting, yeah.
And one of them actually is pretty high on my list. I won't say what yet.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So,
but I understand what you're saying because some of those films, like Oppenheimer, I actually really did like it. I liked the way it was structured. But it's also one of those things like, how many times am I going to watch it? And I feel like a favorite movie has got to be one that you want to go back to over and over again.
I agree with you 100%.
So my number 10 is a movie called Strays, which is a R-rated talking dog movie.
I remember that, yeah.
And it's Will Ferrell is the main talking dog, and he gets abandoned in the city by his terrible owner, played by Will Forte. And then he hooks up with another group of strays, and they decide that they're going to get revenge on his owner. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like this is a great movie, but there is one scene in this movie that had me laughing harder than anything else this year.
Wow.
To the point where my chest was hurting hours later.
That's funny.
So for that reason alone, I had to include it.
Well, and that's what a best movie list should be. It doesn't, it's that whole thing, of, oh, this is a great movie, it's grand. Yeah, but is it something that you enjoy?
Right.
And that to me is what a movie should be.
Right. And to have such a visceral reaction, I couldn't stop laughing. We had to stop the movie.
All right, that's going to be on my list. So is it my turn now?
Yes.
So my number 10 movie was one I actually just saw a couple weeks ago on streaming called The Killer, which is a Michael Fassbender movie.
Oh, yeah, I missed that one.
And basically, he's an assassin who makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And then just what happens. And it's great because it's kind of subtle. It's not, there's action, but it's not just constant action.
And that's a Fincher movie, right?
Maybe.
Is it a David Fincher?
I
thought it was.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
And it's smart. And it's but it's not so smart that you're confused. It's,
Yeah.
And Michael Fassbender is just great.
Yeah.
He's great in, almost anything he does. So that made it to my list of top 10.
All right. Yeah, no, that was, and this is the thing. There's so many movies come out, especially with all these streaming services.
18,198 movies were released according to IMDb last year.
That's crazy. And it's because there's all these streaming services, and so it's so hard to keep up. So that was one that came, and I was like, oh, yeah, I got to watch that. But then 10 million other things came out.
A week later, it's like, I forgot about that. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have to put that one back on my list. So my number 9 is Renfield.
Missed it again for the same reason.
And this was a movie, when I saw the trailer for, I thought this was going to be a big hit because it was actually released in theaters.
Right.
And it came and it just went. And it's, in this, Renfield it's kind of that when he eats bugs, he basically gets superpowers, super strength.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's supposed to be for him to help Dracula feed, but he kind of at some point just gets tired of it and he starts using it for good and trying to get away from him. And it's Nicolas Cage's Dracula.
Yeah.
And it's everything you want from Nicolas Cage playing Dracula. It's over the top. It's weird. It's just Nicolas Cage as Dracula. It's what you want.
Right.
And it also, oddly, even though it's this very funny and gory movie, it's an allegory for getting out of a toxic relationship and a codependent relationship. And to use Dracula and Renfield as that it's very smart, but it's not something you'd ever really think about. And it's really well done.
Oh, that's great. Well, Nicolas Cage is at the point now where, it's not like he's not trying to act, but he knows who he is.
Yes.
So play it up. The one that came out a year ago, I'm drawing a blank on the name, where he played himself.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievably funny because he's playing Nicolas Cage. So embrace that.
And he said that his Dracula was inspired by his father.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's on my list. I got to watch that. So this is great. My number 8 was No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence and Andrew Barth Feldman. A clever movie. It could have been so horrible.
Yeah.
But it's just played up. She is great. He is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the storyline works. You know where it's going. Actually, you don't know exactly where it's going. You kind of know where it's going. But it's fun. It takes place in a summer resort, in the Hamptons. And it was just enjoyable. And, not overtly, not a lot of swearing, not a lot of sex, so just kind of an enjoyable movie and funny and some really, laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, and it's just a good R-rated comedy, which we're not really getting a lot of, good R-rated comedies. And that kid you mentioned, he had a start in Broadway. And so there's this one moment where he sings this ballad version of Maneater.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, and that's a great scene.
Yeah.
It's just, a lot of pathos, I guess, in
Yeah.
that scene.
And it comes out of nowhere because it is this movie where it is very raunchy and funny. And all of a sudden, this is it's kind of like this gut punch. You're like, oh, this is I'm getting kind of emotional here.
Yeah.
This is really good.
No, I enjoyed that one.
Yeah. My number 8 is Asteroid City. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan, and this is kind of leaning into all of his quirks and idiosyncratic style, because he's a very stylized filmmaker. And some people say that kind of can push people away a little bit. And this, he kind of just leans into it. It might make the movie even more esoteric, but what I liked about it is that it kind of plays with the artifice of theater and film and reality. Because at times it's a theatrical production, and then it's a film production, and then there's behind the scenes, and it's all kind of happening at the same time. And then it kind of becomes an allegory for life itself.
Oh, cool.
And it's also very funny, and if you're in that wavelength, if you're in the Wes Anderson wavelength, it's very funny. It's dry and deadpan. Tom Hanks is in it. Steve Carell is in it. Bryan Cranston is kind of this Rod Sterling-esque narrator who pops up throughout the movie. At one point, the camera pulls over and he's like, "Oh wait, I'm not supposed to be here." He disappears.
Yeah, it's been on. That's another one on my list. But again, when it came out, I'm like, "Yep, I gotta watch it. I gotta watch it." And it fades away, and you forget about these things. I have my IMDb watch list, which is 500 movies, because I think of it and I put it on there. And then when I'm scrolling through it to watch a movie, I'm like, "Nah, I don't feel like that one. No, I don't feel like that one tonight."
Yeah.
And it's all based on mood. But that's one that because I love Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah.
Is that just a great movie.
Yeah.
Back to me. So my next one, cheesy, everything else. It was never released in theaters, I don't think, but it was called Love at First Sight with Haley Lou Richardson, and I think it's Ben Hardy. I think that's his name. And basically, they're two people who both missed their flight. They get put on another flight to England. Everything happens. They end up sitting next to each other, and so again, where it's going. But it's the acting and just some of the story. There's a few twists in there that you don't expect. Some of the other actors who are in it, particularly when they get to England, are great. And some of them, you look at their credentials, they've done Broadway, they've done, English theater, everything else. They've been in all these movies. So that just really adds to it.
Yeah.
I would say it's definitely, don't expect, it's Oppenheimer. But if you want to just sit down and watch a nice rom-com, 100%. I would watch that.
I haven't seen that yet. I do love a good rom-com, and romantic comedies get a bad rap.
They do, absolutely.
And when you have a good one, it's just pure joy. When you have a good one, it's pure escapism, and it just makes you feel good.
Yeah, and there's another one which I forgot now, which is very similar with Angourie Rice and Gaten Matano, and I'm drawing a blank, and it's like Honor Student or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's, or Honor Society.
Honor Society. Like good twist in that, and again, just a nice movie just to sit and watch.
Yeah, yeah. And then my number 7 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Interesting.
I am a Marvel fan.
Yep.
And this is by far, there were 3 theatrically released Marvel movies. This is by far the best one.
Of the year.
And I'm a big fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think they're the strongest, among the strongest films because they are character-driven instead of plot-driven.
Yep.
And it really dives into who these characters are, why these characters are, and this one gets into the backstory, the very tragic backstory of Rocket Raccoon.
Right.
And it doesn't shy away from showing some very hard visuals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising for a $200 million superhero film to go where it goes.
Yeah.
Because these are hard emotions, and it doesn't shy away. And I was kind of taken aback by how moving the movie actually was.
Yeah. And it was almost on my list. 1 and 2 are my 2 favorite Marvel movies.
Right.
And the only thing about Guardians 3, it just became bloated with so many different characters. That's what's so great about the first one. It's a very small movie.
Yeah.
The second one, and I go back and forth, which is my favorite, the first and the second. The second one, it's deep. That one is, unbelievably deep.
Yeah, the father-son dynamic in that is
so the only thing about it, I think it just became bloated, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So it was a bubbling under because I love Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It is,
and I've watched those tons of times.
And I understand that because that was actually one of my big criticisms with movies this year, not this year, last year, was length. Too many films were like way too long.
Right.
That one was just on the cusp for me of being like, okay, it's not feeling too long, but I can understand how it could be too long for some people.
Right. Yeah. All righty. So next for me, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning.
Okay.
In terms of, I love a good action movie. I won't count Fast 6 and Fast and Furious, but they're fun.
Yeah.
But at least these ones are smart.
Yep.
And so well done. The characters have been defined. What's great is that Tom Cruise is no longer the star of the movie. It's everybody else. He's still in it. There was a scene, there was a section of him going, what happened to Tom Cruise,
Which is what it should be. Mission Impossible is always an ensemble.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, they introduced some new characters. You lost some favorite characters in it. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the ending was unbelievable because it's part 1.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's going to end like that. It didn't. It throws you for a loop with the ending in a good way. And I really enjoyed that. I mean, like I said, I've watched all the Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what absurd thing are you going to throw at me?
Yep.
But they've actually tamed it down a little. There's a couple things where you're like, yeah, you can't do that. But they're still on the believable side.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I liked all the people, all real effects, like when they're in the car, when they're handcuffed together driving this car, that's all real.
Yeah.
That's not CGI.
Yeah, and because there's always at least one absolutely insane stunt.
Yeah.
That Tom Cruise does, and it's him driving a bike off this cliff, and it's insane, but he did it.
They did that like 15 times.
I know, because they had to get the shot right.
Right.
And there's also an insane sequence with a runaway train.
Oh, the train stuff is great.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I didn't put it on my list just because this was a film where I was kind of feeling the length. And it was, because it's 2:45, I think.
Yeah, it's a long one.
It's a long one, and I was like, does this need to be 2 parts? This just feels a little bit gratuitous.
Well, if it had been 1 part, it would have been a very long movie. So.
There were some things in there where
they could have definitely cut.
There was one scene in a club that was basically exposition dump the scene. and it went for like 10 minutes. And I was like, I don't really need to know why you're doing the things you're doing. It's always just a MacGuffin in these movies.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they're trying to do. It's just you want them to succeed.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So my number 6 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
I haven't seen that.
I am a big Ninja Turtles fan, so I'm not going to say this was on here by default, because there have been Ninja Turtles films I did not like, but this one, you can even see in that visual there, the animation is done in a style that is kind of like the doodles that you would do on your notebook as a kid. So the lines aren't perfect.
Yep.
It is CG, but it's done in a way that looks hand-drawn. And so the explosions will have like little scribbly lines for the puffs and everything.
Cool.
And so it's just, visually it's very cool looking. And it's also the first time the characters have actually been performed by teenagers. Like, crazy idea. And they feel like teenagers, and they were all recorded together, and they were allowed to improvise. So they're talking over each other, they're making fun of each other. So it's kind of the first time that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have actually felt like teenagers.
Yep.
And so that's fun. You have Jackie Chan as Splinter, and he's kind of portrayed as this overbearing father instead of like the ninja master. And it's just a lot of fun. Oh. And I think it's one of those films that even if you're not familiar with these characters, you could get into it.
Yeah. No, it sounds like I'd like to watch that. All right. Number 5, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Again, and I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons at all, the plot line of it. But just an enjoyable movie. Just you sit there and it's fun. I mean, there's, action, romance, love. The closest movie I would relate it to would be The Princess Bride. Mm-hmm. The characters are all great in it. Everybody, the characterizations and how they did it. Hugh Grant is just, playing Hugh Grant, but he's great. And just a fun movie to watch and enjoy. Yeah. And you don't go in. I didn't go in with any pretexts because I didn't know about the game. I don't know how it works. I know how it works, but and they did it very well. And there's a nice arc of stories and connections with people. Yeah. It was definitely a fun movie to go see.
Yeah, it was almost on my list. It is an incredibly fun film, like you just said. And I'm kind of surprised we haven't gotten more Dungeons and Dragons movies.
Right.
Because it's perfectly set for films, because it's all about the different guilds of characters. Yeah. And they're already very clearly defined who these characters are, and you can just plop them in to an adventure, because the game itself doesn't have a plot. It's whoever the master creates the plot. So you can literally do anything. And I think it's because there was a terrible, terrible Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out in 2000 that kind of killed any idea of But now this one did pretty well, and it was well liked, and so maybe we'll get some more, because Chris Pine is hilarious.
I would love to see a sequel to it. Everybody in it was enjoyable. Yeah. And just the mood of it. Like I said, the closest thing to relate it to me is Princess Bride. Yeah. And how do you ever fault Princess Bride? Right. So.
Let's see. Cracking into the top 5 now. My number 5 is Wonka. I was hesitant about this because the idea of a prequel to Wonka, like the cynic in me was like, no, that's a terrible idea. But it's directed by Peter King, or Paul King, I think his name is, who did the Paddington movies. And I adore the Paddington movies. They're so good. And I don't know why. It's this new thing with Hollywood. They don't advertise musicals as being musicals. Wonka is a full musical.
Is it really? See, I didn't even know. I thought it had a few songs.
No, it's a full musical, original musical. The only song they bring over is Pure Imagination. Yeah. But everything else is a 100% original musical. And the songs are great. It's got this very screwball, whimsical sense of humor. A real sense of wonder and magic and awe, and it is just delightful.
I'll have to give it a shot, because I heard some positive stuff. I heard some negative stuff. It's still playing in the theater here.
Yeah, I know.
And Timothée Chalamet can do no wrong in my book. Yeah. He's just always good, and so I'll have to give it, because the original one, that was the first book I ever read as a kid. Of some substance. was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So I should give it
And
that. And I know it's not based off of those books, but it's still
within the universe.
spirit,
And
yeah.
I kind of had to a little bit detach from it because it is Willy Wonka. But if you're trying to like line it up 100% with the book or 100% with the movie, it's kind of its own entity. But as just like this random chocolatier that just happens to be named Willy Wonka, it's really charming.
That's a good way to look at it. I was not a fan of the Johnny Depp version.
No.
There was one hysterical joke in it. Other than that, I thought it was, the original one. Whatever it's called, the one with Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. There's so many of them. That's a dark movie.
Yeah.
There are some things in there that are,
Yeah.
and as an adult, when you watch it now, going,
Yeah,
there's
and
some
this
crazy stuff.
is not dark at all. This is a
that's good.
light,
Okay.
whimsical, fun movie, and on that basis, it's very charming.
Cool. All right, I will put that on my list too. Number 4, again, another one that I saw recently that, in my opinion, should have been up for Oscars and everything else, was The Iron Claw.
Oh, I didn't.
With Zac Efron.
I didn't see that, but it was on my list to watch.
Jeremy Allen White. Amazing movie. My son saw it first, and he loved it. And it's a movie about brothers, and so I really understand why my son liked it. There were elements of it that, if you have brothers or whatever, you're going to connect with those things with it. The story is amazing. It's a true story, filmed in a great way, because it takes place in the 80s or whatever. Subdued tones and everything else. Probably not a bad note in it, and very, very enjoyable and emotional and sad, happy and sad. So it definitely is. And I don't understand why. Even if it got kind of an aside nomination for music or background noise or whatever, it's a great movie.
I feel like a lot of times with the Academy, they lean towards their Oscar-worthy movies.
The 4 that I gave at the beginning.
And I haven't seen that yet, but I've heard the acting is very good. But it's also about wrestling, and obviously there was The Wrestler that did get nominations, but that was kind of an anomaly, and it was also that was done by a prestige director.
Right.
So I think part of it might have been the subject matter, like, oh well, that's we don't do that.
Wrestling is fake and everything is, but you watch this movie, it's like it's not that fake. It is fake, but
what they're doing is not fake.
No,
like,
they are athletic.
It's scripted.
Yeah, it's scripted, but I watched some of that stuff and go, I wouldn't last a minute in the ring.
So my number 4, and there was some debate on how I phrased this movie. I'm going to call it Richards the Musical, but it's not.
I haven't. I wanted to watch that. I've heard that is just a fun movie.
So this was one of the best movie-going experiences I had last year.
Did you see it in a theater?
I didn't see it in a theater, but I had a big group of people come over, and we watched it together. And this is so outrageous and so crass and so vulgar.
That's what I've heard.
That watching it with a big group was an experience, because it is genuinely shocking at times, but in a good way.
Yeah.
It is essentially The Parent Trap with 2 adult men.
I've heard that.
And it's the parents are Megan Mullally and Nathan Lane. And you really can't go wrong with that.
Right.
And so what I've been saying, because the fun, popular thing to say right now, because everyone's so obsessed with, oh, it's so PC, you can't be funny anymore, is to say, oh, you could never make a movie like Blazing Saddles today. This movie proves that wrong, because it crosses so many lines. By the end, you're kind of applauding something that you're like, wait a second, that's grossly inappropriate, but good for them.
Yeah, but it's a movie, and that's what it's part of that experience. You can't go out on the street and go to Starbucks and start behaving that way.
Yeah.
But you can in a movie, and I've heard great things about that.
And I think part of it, because it goes to an extreme at the end, and I think part of the point of it is that extreme is basically how conservatives perceive the LGBTQ community. So they take it to an extreme. They take it to the extreme that they like, oh, this is what you think our community is? Okay, well, here it is.
That's awesome. All right. So the next one, another Michael Fassbender movie, Next Goal Wins, which is a Taika Waititi movie.
I haven't watched it yet. I love Taika.
My
though.
son had said, "You got to watch, you got to watch, you got to watch it." And we couldn't get it on streaming, and we all watched it when we were together a month ago. And a great movie. Again, another true story. I seem to have a theme with mine. Another, but very subtle. To be honest, one of the best things about it is Taika Waititi is just a tiny character in it, because he can be over the top.
He's a great scene stealer, though.
He's a great scene stealer, but just a fun movie. And a couple of things at the very beginning when this person has to go through the 7 stages of grief is hysterical. And it just is, again, just a nice movie.
And it's Michael Fassbender basically becoming a coach for a losing team.
Right. He was a prominent soccer coach, then had some on-field problems. And they're like, here, this is your last chance. Go to have this team. And it's great because it makes sense. It's not like, oh, yeah, that would never happen. This team could never achieve this. Oh, it's because of this coach. No, it's all just about, it's about heart, if you want to say. And really funny. There's great things about the speed limit in, they're not in New Zealand. I can't remember the country. And it's just, again, another fun movie, great family movie just to sit down and watch. Everybody would get something from it.
Yeah. That's on my list. I love Taika Waititi. I think he's a really great and unique director. I love his voice as a filmmaker. So that is on my list of something to watch.
Yeah, the one 3 years ago. What was it? The Hitler one.
Oh yeah, Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit. That would probably be my top 10 movies of all time.
Yeah. So my number 3 is one of those movies, The Holdovers.
There you go. I knew this would be on people's list.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This movie I watched it in anticipation of the Academy Awards, and it really kind of just snuck up on me. I like the intimacy of it. I like that it is, like I was saying about Guardians of the Galaxy, it's character driven. There isn't really a plot.
Right.
Which is fine. I'm fine with that. And it does have a familiar trope with the idea of sort of this curmudgeon guy and this kind of little punk kid.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, they're going to make each other better. And they do, but they don't.
Right.
And they learn lessons, but they don't. And the way they learn those lessons, the way they become better, it's subtle, and I appreciate that subtlety. Paul Giamatti is brilliant.
Yeah.
This is the kind of performance I wish would win Best Actor. Oppenheimer, it's a great performance that Cillian Murphy does, but it's that thing that the Academy loves so much of, it's a showy performance in the sense that, oh, well, he's performing somebody else, and we have a reference point so we can say, look how he's doing such a good job of being that person, where you have somebody like Paul Giamatti playing a character that we all know, that sort of guy that is so smart, but he has no social skills, and he kind of pushes everybody away. We all know a person like that, and he nails that so well.
I think if it's a type of movie, I wish I'd seen it in the theater, and I wish I'd seen it before I heard anything about it.
Yeah.
Because by the time I saw it, oh, this is great. Paul Giamatti is great. Oh, so it kind of had reached that point where if I had just walked in sight unseen, it probably would have been on the list.
Yeah.
The scenes, no spoiler, the stuff in Boston.
Yeah.
I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I loved what they did with that. And the visuals, because again, they filmed it like even the opening credits.
Yeah.
They use the old logo, so it looks like a 1970s movie.
And they do a good job of not even making it look like, but actually having the pace and the tone of that era. And I was really happy to see Devane Joy Randolph win Best Supporting Actress, because she gives a really good performance of the cook of this private school, who's grieving the loss of her son from Vietnam, and it's a very good performance, and I was happy to see that win.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the bubbling under. Again, one of those things that you hear so much. And maybe it's something I revisit in a year, and I'll go, this is really good.
I think
because it is the subtleness.
Yeah, and it is set around Christmas, so I do think it could kind of be sort of a quirky alternative movie to watch around Christmas time. And maybe that's when you revisit it, and maybe it'll just strike you as like, oh, this is actually a really nice, warm movie for the holiday.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so number 2, kind of should it be number 1, should it be number 2, is Barbie.
Okay.
I loved Barbie. I thought everything about it. the one thing, I love the fact that, you could take your 6-year-old kid to it and they would enjoy it because they wouldn't get some of the stuff. But we can watch it on all those things. I think the girl power element of it was great. Ryan Gosling, unbelievable. A shout out to Michael Cera.
Yeah.
Who's just like,
Alan. I love Alan.
I'm
and
Alan.
I might as well talk about it now, too, because it is my number one. It is the movie that I absolutely loved beyond every other. It's one of those rare movies that I think that was like an instant, people say this all the time, like instant classic.
Yeah,
like this is a
absolutely.
movie that in 10 years, people are still going to be watching, and it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, no, and I think that just all the visuals, everything about it, and just funny little elements of
Yeah.
it. I really, and the I'm Just Ken in the movie
Yeah.
is just, you talk about a showstopper.
Yep.
Or a movie stopper, and even to the end, I did not see that coming.
Oh,
the
yeah.
very end scene, but love that, and I love what they did with it. So no, it was one of those that I left the theater, if you could say, cheering, I wasn't cheering, but that's
Yeah.
the way I felt because it just was everything about it.
Yeah, and it's one of those movies that shouldn't be good by all intents
Oh,
and
and
purposes.
100%.
It's a movie based on a toy. And the fact that Warner Brothers spent like $100 million to make a movie that is very weird, very at times surreal and
Yeah.
quirky, this could have been the safest, most banal movie imaginable. And they actually made a pretty risky movie
Right.
with a strong message. And even though it is, quote unquote, a message movie, it's also very, very funny.
Yeah.
And that's the way you to like put a message. If you kind of like couch it within comedy, you can get your message across in a more meaningful way.
And they're crossing the two worlds, our world and the Barbie world, and they did it in a good way. It wasn't like, it doesn't make sense. It almost like you would expect it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And everybody in it, Margot Robbie was phenomenal as Barbie. So
Yeah, and there's all
as
the
one Barbie, not
yeah, and all of the other Barbies and Kens that are just in the background, and sometimes they only have 1 or 2 lines, but they're all cast by really great actors.
right. And Alan.
And Alan, I love Alan. I have a couple Alan shirts.
Oh yeah, he just loved.
So that's my number one. So I'll do my number two. My number two is Cocaine Bear, which I will not defend as being a great movie.
You've talked about this before
Yeah.
and I have a movie to tie in with Cocaine
Yeah.
Bear. Go ahead with that. 'Cause
I will not defend this as being a great movie, and it's one of those like based on a true story movies,
Right.
Where it's like the true story is that yes, a bear found some cocaine that a drug trafficker threw out an airplane. He ate it, died instantly because of course
Right.
he did. But this is also sort of like his redemption story. It's directed by Elizabeth Banks, so it's got a comedic feel. But it's like, well, what if that bear just went on a rampage? And has the perfect tone. It's not a horror movie, but it's got, campy gore. It has just the perfect tone of like campy fun.
Yep.
And I loved it. And
Well,
it's also Ray Liotta's last movie.
Right. and to go along with that is one of my favorite movies from the year before. If this had been this year, I would have added to it, was Violent Night, which is
Yes.
the Santa Claus
Yep.
movie, which is just, I saw it, I think, 4 times in the theater.
Yeah.
Because I kept taking different people. Great movie. And if you kind of look at the story, it could be a Hallmark Channel movie.
Oh, yeah.
And David Harbour as Santa Claus, he's a Santa Claus is just kind of, I've been Santa Claus for a long time, and then he helps his family, who are being held hostage by bad guys. But it's great, and there's funny things in this stuff with the reindeer. I mean, easily one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And very similar to that feel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but I loved that movie. Yeah.
you talk about, when you talk about acting, Academy Award things, if you look at Violent Night, David Harbour held that entire movie, and that was acting. I mean,
Yeah.
what he did in that movie. So, all right. So my favorite movie, which Barbie would have been had this not come out, but I saw this a couple months ago, and I heard about it, and I said, this is interesting. I really want to see this. Went to see it in the theater. There was only about 25 people in the theater. And from the minute the movie started, no lie, from the minute the movie started, it starts at a big opening, you're like, is this the movie? Are we into it? There was not a sound in that theater until the end of the movie. Nobody crumbled popcorn. Nobody rustled in their seats. And part of it is because of what it's about, and that is the zone of interest.
Oh, I haven't seen this yet.
Unbelievable. And basically it's about the commandant of Auschwitz and his family who live in the house next to Auschwitz. But it's never discussed what's happening in Auschwitz. You never see what's happening, but it's next door. There's some visuals, there's sound. The sound in it was amazing. It won Best Sound for an Oscar. It won Best Foreign Film. And and the way they filmed it, they did a lot of cameras that were just placed around. So when somebody's going up the stairs, it's all one shot and everything else. And it's a horrible, horrible time in our world. And it doesn't make light of it. It's none of that. It just is. It's you call it a slice of life or whatever, but easily one of the best movies I've ever seen because of how they did it. It could have been terrible, but again, because this is a family living their everyday life, which is not a life that we want to be part of. But they're living their life, and I was blown away by the movie. And no music in the movie except for some incidental music. And that was part of it. Again, you're sitting there for however long the movie was, and you're like, where is this going? And it doesn't go, it's, starts here, it ends here. It doesn't go to 1945 or anything like that. And
yeah, that was one of those ones that I didn't quite catch. I was trying to sort of catch up on all of the Oscar-nominated movies, and that just wasn't one of the ones I quite got to. I wanted to see it, but I just didn't get a chance to.
And it's one of those things you gotta settle in a quiet spot. Hopefully on the biggest screen you have. It's something don't plan to get up and get snacks or anything like that. Just take it in.
Don't have your phone out fiddling on it.
Right. So that's my list of the 10 best. And it was interesting going through trying to find these movies. A couple, came up right away. Like my top 4. Zone of Interest, Barbie, Next Goal Wins. I knew those were going to be in my list. But then kind of looking back and remembering, when I saw I was like, what is No Hard? And then I remembered I really enjoyed No Hard Feelings.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have a hard time coming up with my list because a lot of the big movies this year were kind of duds. Like Indiana Jones 5. It was fine.
I wanted to put, but I was like,
it was fine.
Right, it was fine.
Like John Wick 4, really good, but it was one of those things where it's like, did it need to be 3 hours long? Not really. Not really. But that's the thing. But I could have done another list of 10 very easily.
Yeah. But it's interesting that with the exception of The Holdovers, you didn't have Killers of the Flower Moon, American Fiction. Did you have American Fiction?
I didn't have American Fiction.
Oppenheimer, Poor Things. And those are the movies that people kind of throw at you, that this is what you have to enjoy.
Oppenheimer and Poor Things were just kind of bubbling there because I did like Oppenheimer, and I didn't have a problem with the structure of it, and I was able to follow it. Poor Things, I did like Emma Stone's performance was amazing.
She was great.
And the tone of it is very interesting. There's a lot of gratuitous sex that probably could have been cut back, but I think that's also kind of the point, is to make you uncomfortable because so much of it is about how the world perceives women's autonomy and like, oh, well, a woman can't act that way. And so I feel like it's forcing you to look at that and make you uncomfortable, but then that doesn't necessarily make it a good experience.
And I've always been, there are big movies I love, but when I was a kid, we went to the movies probably every weekend, and this was when we were watching The Sting and The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico and all these movies, and so I really got a feel for a lot of quieter movies. There are movies too that I just watch and I'm like, that was great, and then you're like, have you heard this movie? Have you heard of this movie? Have you heard it? Nobody has. And so I think that's part of it. I think all of those were also presented. Killers of the Flower Moon had some great elements to it. Again, Jesse Plemons, who's always good in everything. I felt that, I apologize for not getting her name, the lead actress. You talk about too subtle. That's why she was not going to win the Oscar because it was so good. Because she carries the whole movie so subtly. And I like that. I like movies where you can just kind of go, that was a great movie.
And that's kind of why I included The Holdovers, because it was a movie that you can lean back and kind of just enjoy and just be like, oh, this is a nice quiet movie.
Right. And that, of all of these, I would probably revisit The Holdovers
Yeah.
because I'd want to see again. It's the vibe thing. What was my mood that night?
Yeah. We need to wrap this
Oh,
up.
yeah, no worries.
One movie that I did watch that was in the 10 that were nominated for Best Picture that didn't get talked about a lot, and I wouldn't necessarily put it on my 10 best list, but it was a nice small movie, was Past Lives.
Yeah, my wife saw that. I didn't get a chance to see that.
And
She
it's
really
just
liked it.
this really nice, again, character-driven story of people just living and interacting and how they connect. And I like small little intimate stories like that. So I was happy that it got nominated in the top 10 because one of the good things about being nominated for Best Picture, even if you're not going to win, is that it puts puts it on people's map.
Right. And
Which again, with this list, I think we both tried to pick movies that
right,
not
and
necessarily.
they're ones that I want to see off of your list, and I like that they have the 10 movies for that reason. So it's not just the blockbusters. It's seeing it. Now, a little spoiler alert. I guarantee you, if we do this again next year, on this list will be Dune 2.
Okay.
Dune Part 2. So
I still haven't watched Dune 2 because I had a hard time getting into the first one.
I watched it again.
Yeah.
Then saw Dune Part 2 the next night or 2 nights later, and really, really enjoyed. Again, just because of it's not an overblown movie.
All right. So that's a preview of next year.
Next year. See
All
us
right.
next March.
Yeah. So so come back and get lost in movies again.